long as we get paid or you get shot, I'm happy.
You are a sick man, Arthur Morgan. A very sick man indeed.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is an excellent video game. Every moment that I spent in its world getting to know its many personalities, absorbing myself in its atmosphere, shooting and fist-fighting my way out of predicaments that I'd created, they were all moments of joy. To this day, it remains one of my all-timers, a game that I would, without hesitation, wholeheartedly recommend to anyone. But it's also a game that I haven't touched for the better part of 4 years. And that's perfectly normal. Games come to their ultimate conclusions, and that's okay. But to this day, I'd always felt like there was more to that game to come back to. Different avenues to experience, and interactions that were missed. What's more interesting, I think, and why I bring this up now, is the story behind why I stopped playing in the first place, despite feeling like there was more to do. Red Dead 2's conclusion was satisfying, but it left me wanting more. My problem really was that aimless wandering without a sense of purpose generally just isn't my style. I needed a goal, something to keep me invested. So I turned to what at that point had become a comfortable habit: achievement hunting. I was fairly new to it at the time, but the games I'd managed success in up to this point were really worth it for me. I'd recently 100% completed Sekiro and Hollow Knight and loved those experiences, so why not? Another worthy investment? A goal. Things started off well. I completed a number of side objectives, caught some really big fish, scavenged some interesting collectibles, and along the way, I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. More interactions, more characters, more of the game that I loved. Alright, so what was next off the list then? Oh no.
Oh, great.
Now, I didn't really know much about Red Dead Online going into things. I knew it wasn't going to thrill me as much as the main game, but I figured I could push through it really fast, not stick around or get distracted, and who knows, maybe the online component would be alright. I mean, GTA Online was pretty fun back in high school, so it can't be that bad. What ensued was some of the most painful, mind-numbing grind that I've ever had to endure in a video game. Endless repeats of missions, an online player base that was neither communicative nor respectful, a cascade of cheating, among other pain points. What dawned on me was that many of the game's achievements were tied to a component that felt completely separated from what I loved about the main game. And after hours of attempting to ignore that reality and continue the painful grind, I finally, after all the monotony, accomplished nothing. I gave up. Despite having so much more to do in the single player, I threw in the towel, disappointed and disgruntled with both myself and the game, and I moved on. Red Dead 2 wouldn't be the last time that happened. Batman Arkham City, Mad Max, Doom Eternal, Hogwarts Legacy, all games that I made the attempt, but ultimately couldn't manage for one reason or another. Worse still, these are great games whose memory is now forever tainted by that fact. The achievement hunting pulled me into an experience that not only did I not enjoy in isolation, but actually changed my memory and enjoyment of the game overall. In some cases, ruining any motivation and joy that the game gave me to begin with. So why the hell did I even bother then? Well, because it wasn't always bad. In fact, many other times it was fantastic. For every game that lured me into bad experiences, there were games that did the opposite. Hollow Knight, Risk of Rain 2, Elden Ring, Psychonauts 2, Trombone Champ. These were all games that I did manage to conquer, and were all the better for it. I loved spending time hunting for these accomplishments because they elevated the experience of actually playing the game for me. After a number of years successfully and unsuccessfully achievement hunting, it got me thinking, what separates the good from the bad in this regard, and what does a good achievement even look like? And why does it even matter to me? Further than that, what is it that pulls us towards stomaching the worst that a game can throw at us, all seemingly for the sake of a badge? What I love about the video game medium is that there is no one answer to this question. Games can be experienced and understood in many ways, and what motivates us to play them can be wildly different. When asked about why I achievement hunt, the question is often phrased, why do you even want a meaningless badge? They don't do anything. My answer is always the same. Achievements and their respective badges are not inherently motivating, at least not for me. Rather, they serve as catalysts towards intrinsic motivation. I don't achievement hunt every single game that I play. In fact, I've only fully completed roughly 5% of the games that I own, because it's not the badge that motivates me. Rather, it's my own intrinsic motivation to see more of a game that pulls me towards the badge. This is where the danger presents itself though. When developers design achievements well, they can present further options to players that already have intrinsic motivation to explore them. but when designed poorly, they can lead players down a path that will eventually sour them to the overall experience, sometimes even to the point of having a negative effect on their perceptions of the game overall. As much as I was just singing its praises, I look back to Red Dead 2 as an example of this. This game has one of the largest, most sprawling and varied open worlds ever made. The amount of small, secret encounters that the player can stumble upon that are genuinely as high quality as the main story is frankly staggering. And yet, from looking purely at the achievements, you really wouldn't know it. As I already touched on, half of them revolve around the game's comparatively abysmal online mode, and the rest are centered around some of the more strangely menial tasks in a world full of interesting ones. Worse still, poor achievements can actively detract from the core experience of a game, taking formulas, ideas, and concepts that worked and straying so far from them that the core gameplay loop suffers. Take for example Risk of Rain Returns, by all accounts another really stellar game. It took the original Risk of Rain, an underappreciated classic, added some great new content, mechanics, items, and released to a much wider audience owing to the success of its sequel. Just like the second entry, I loved this game, and seriously got into it. The gameplay loop was instantly as addicting, with its own unique combat style that kept things fresh. Naturally, I began to achievement hunt both because of that intrinsic motivation, but also because many of the game's tangible rewards are tied to the achievement system. And that experience, much like the achievement hunt of the second game, was a great excuse to continue playing. That is, up until the Providence Trial achievements. For those unaware, let me give you some context. Risk of Rain is a procedural roguelike, and like most roguelikes, the largest appeal is that each new run presents a brand new challenge with different scenarios presenting themselves via randomized enemies, map layouts, and enemies. The Providence Trial, however, is a bit of a shake-up. It is the final trial in a set of many optional mini-games that the player can participate in, most of which are creative uses of the base mechanics in interesting ways. The final trial, however, is almost exactly like the base Risk of Rain experience, only with one major caveat. The run is completely deterministic. All of the items are preset, the levels, bosses, and enemies within them are all unchanging. And it is by far the most difficult mechanical challenge that Risk of Rain has to offer. Essentially, it takes everything enjoyable about the roguelike elements of the game and strips them in favor of pure challenge, where luck is no longer an avenue for success. In isolation, this doesn't actually sound all that bad, and it's not. It's a decent idea, a shake-up of the formula, and a real test of knowledge and skill. By itself, devoid of the achievements associated, it is all good. But in this particular case, it's the achievements that got in the way of the experience for me, rather than elevating it. In order to 100% this game, you must beat this same trial with its same unchanging levels, items, and enemies on every single character in the game. Doesn't sound all that bad if you haven't played it, but trust me, this is an absolute slog. Made worse by the fact that because of its set items and level layouts, some of those characters who aren't synergistic with those given items are hamstrung to the point where unless you achieve near mechanical perfection, you will fail. Compare this to something like Hollow Knight's Embrace the Void achievement, which is a one-time completion of the game's pinnacle challenge, its fifth Pantheon. A challenge that emphasizes and demands mastery of its core components without detracting from what makes them special. Or even Risk of Rain 2, the sequel, has various Monsoon achievements which present a formidable challenge but still retain the core roguelike formula that makes Risk of Rain what it is. These are examples of achievements providing that direction, purpose, and challenge which elevate the experience of a game beyond what a single playthrough could. There's nothing wrong with achievements shaking up the gameplay formula, but I think like all gameplay elements, designers should evaluate what that shakeup is actually accomplishing before placing in the achievement. So often I see achievements that provide gameplay shakeups that feel like they are there just for the sake of being different, rather than actually seeking to steer the player towards an alternative way of engaging with the game that's actually enjoyable in its own way. There's a reason that not every possible challenge in a game ends up becoming a popular challenge run. Because some challenges, some alternative approaches to playing games just aren't that fun. I think a good example of shakeups done well is Prey 2016, namely its Split Affinity achievement. Throughout Prey, the player is given options of upgrades to either human or Typhoid abilities, Typhoid being the aliens overrunning the Talos 1 space station where the game is set. Split Affinity requires 2 additional playthroughs of the same game, each locking you off of the ability to select one category of upgrades or another. Each of these options provide very different upgrades and in turn force their own unique approaches to gameplay and combat. Had this been a more arbitrary goal, forcing multiple replays without guiding the player towards exploring new approaches to the game's systems that are genuinely fun to engage with, this achievement would have been a detrimental chore, but instead it steers the players towards a new experience. Another interesting one is the I and Thou and I and It achievements, requiring you to both save or kill everyone aboard the space station. These actions have significant impacts on the story, guiding you towards brand new narratives that otherwise would have been missed. Now, admittedly, both my examples so far point towards the merit of not only the achievement design, but the design of the games themselves, and had Prey or Hollow Knight not been so versatile and fun in the first place, there would be nothing for an achievement to guide towards. Good achievements can't make a bad game good, because if there's nothing of substance to tie an accomplishment to, then the accomplishment itself loses value. But the important part here is that they can make good games great, and give players the nudge to dive into a game world more than they ever would. Game achievements that force a repeat of the exact same content without adding any variety or addition to that content, like difficulty or story or gameplay shakeups, are running the risk of losing that opportunity, presenting instead an impression that is more stale than it ought to be. This, I think, is a good transition to another pain point: missables. Ask any avid achievement hunter and they will most likely be able to recall a painful memory involving a tiny, insignificant in-game action with an achievement tied to it that was for one reason or another completely missed by the player. I have a couple of ones that I can think of, but I think the most notable was The Witcher 3's Card Collector achievement. A card collector is quite self-explanatory. Collect every single available card for the game Gwent, which is enjoyed as a side activity by many of the game's characters throughout the course of the game. There are a lot of cards, and as you are probably already aware, The Witcher 3 is a big game, which is all well and good. But the catch is that a few of these cards are inaccessible upon failing certain quests, notably the cards gained from several of the game's card tournaments, which present the most formidable Gwent challenge. These result in missed cards upon failed quests. And before the developers patched it out, you could also miss cards if you happened to make pivotal narrative decisions in the game, causing certain NPCs to die before you could acquire them. Failing to keep track of all this from the get-go meant a replay of almost the entire game as before. Luckily though, The Witcher 3's quality and its branching narratives was certainly enough of a motivating factor to press onward and eventually achieve this, but it stung nonetheless. Card collecting wasn't too bad of an example though, as it isn't a particularly arbitrary goal, and actually using the strong cards you collected was pretty satisfying. I think one that really hit a nerve for me was Batman Arkham Asylum's Party Pooper. Towards the conclusion of the excellent Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman is invited by the Joker to a party being thrown in the Arkham West facility. Upon arriving, he is greeted by a number of goons clapping and celebrating his arrival. The Party Pooper achievement involves beating up each and every one of these guards rather than simply walking through and ignoring their applaud. Failing to do so automatically saves the game upon entering the facility and locks you out of an otherwise simple achievement. The only solution? Replay the entire game all over again from start to finish in order to get back to that point and pop the achievement. Luckily, this isn't an enormous game, but playing through the same game without any shakeups or any diverging narratives did not add to my enjoyment of it. At best, it keeps the enjoyment the same, but as I said before, it may actively hinder it. I can't help but feel like this could have been better served as an Easter egg, like an extra line of dialogue from the Joker himself, rather than a tangible goal that needs to be set for the player. I think all of these examples that I've used feed into a wider point almost every time. The achievements that steer me towards hindering my own experiences are the ones that exist without purpose beyond the badge. Often these are the ones that are placed with a clear misunderstanding of why achievements even exist in the first place. Achievements should provide a direction towards a meaningful in-game experience, one that complements the main enjoyment of a game. Whether it's tedious grinds where grind doesn't really belong, or missables that force a repeat of the game without any meaningful changes, achievements that don't provide a means for instilling a truly motivating factor are the ones that fall flat and are unfortunately all too common. We all have different tolerances and preferences in games, and our priorities, our motivations for playing a game have a strong influence on the kind of achievements that we gravitate to and the kind that we don't. Games themselves, in fact all hobbies really, rely on instilling this motivating factor within us. The drive that tells you in that moment, yes, I would like to continue doing what I'm currently doing right now. In an attempt to understand what drives self-motivation in human beings, psychologists Edward L. Deci and Richard Ryan published a book called Intrinsic Motivation and Self-Determination in Human Behavior, which outlined the now common and accepted understanding of self-determination theory. It's quite a detailed theory, so I'll spare you the nitty-gritty, but the main idea is that intrinsic motivators, that is, the motivators that come from ourselves and not from our external environment, can arise from three basic needs: competency, the need to be effective; autonomy, the need for self-governance and independence; and relatedness, the need for close, affectionate relationships. These pillars of intrinsic motivation fit really well into games and game design. And if you look at the games that you enjoy the most, you can probably find a factor of your personal enjoyment and motivation that slots into one of these three categories quite neatly. What well-designed achievements are capable of is helping to further provide these intrinsic motivators to keep us playing beyond what the core game can. The most obvious one here is competence. It's an easy motivation to fulfill when it comes to competitive multiplayer games, for example, because your competency is often proven every time you win. Competition in and of itself fosters motivation and reward through, well, competency. Simply put, it places you against those who are seeking an equal amount, and therefore winning provides you with that satisfaction. Single-player games, though, can be a bit tougher on competency motivation. It's why you'll often see the design of single-player games lean more toward the other pillars, autonomy and relatedness. But designing for competence is not unheard of in a single-player context, and achievements can be a really great way for single-player games to provide competence motivation to players that need that fulfillment but aren't necessarily interested in PvP. Devil May Cry is a really good example here. It's a series that really isn't providing a groundbreaking level of autonomy and freedom, nor does it have any characters and stories to write home about, but through its combat provides a near unmatched level of skill expression and mastery. It's no surprise then that its achievements are almost solely based on reinforcing that competence motivator, nudging players towards getting the most out of its strongest element by rewarding the player for mastering it. Even games that aren't necessarily skill-based, like collectathons for example, can use achievements as a means of both competency and autonomy. If you collect everything and get the achievement for it, it proves patience, diligence, and attention to detail. And it also allows you the freedom to tackle that collection in any way, shape, or form that you see fit. These are all factors of competency and can be strong motivations for the right type of person. I personally am that kind of person, and when writing this video, it helped me better understand why I tend to go through the motions of collecting while staying motivated, but the thought of simply a grind like Helldivers 2's Play 100 missions or Deep Rock Galactic's Gold All Dwarves achievements don't appeal to me anywhere near as much. I have friends of mine that are far more motivated by a growth in other competency-based skills such as mechanical skill or game knowledge, and they play the games that suit them. When it comes to the need for relatedness, it's pretty obvious that games fulfill this mainly through either providing meaningful stories and characters or meaningful multiplayer experiences that grow relationships with friends and family. But for me personally, relatedness is actually the strongest motivator for achievement hunting. Frankly, my big reason for why I like to go for achievements, even the bad ones, is to show them off. You can label that desire as vain, but the truth is that we live in a social world. The desire to display and show accomplishment is a core part of not only our hobbies and friendships, but is so deeply ingrained into our society that it forms the basis of our employment, schooling, travel. You can't hope to get a job without a resume, a show of your skill and experience in an area of work, or maybe a degree, a proof of excellence in academia. You can't open bank accounts without birth certificates. You can't drive a car without a license. Proof is validation both outwardly and personally. And whether we like it or not, validation is a crucial component of self-esteem and enjoyment. Games provide that for me. I don't have a lot of hobbies, nor do I really have much in the way of talent that I can show, but I am good at games. Lots of different games. I've got that at least, and achievements provide a great means for me to prove that, both to myself and to others. It's why poorly designed achievements for my favorite games can especially sting. I've already made the emotional investment into completion. I'm no longer driven by a narrative that I've already completed or an experience that I've already had. I'm driven by that validation. And even though it's not intentional, poorly thought out achievements often feel as though they are preying on that desire, that deeply human need to accomplish and prove those accomplishments to others. When I've reached that point, it's really a question of commitment and the value that I place upon that accomplishment personally. In some cases, the value of that accomplishment is worth the otherwise painstaking effort due to the quality of the game. In others, it's the satisfaction of that outward validation. Maybe it's a game that my friendship group really enjoys, or perhaps has a reputation for being difficult. My mind will subconsciously or even consciously weigh up these factors and come to one of two conclusions. It's either worth the effort, or it's not. But here's where things become increasingly difficult. Gauging effort, especially when it comes to personal endeavors, is almost an impossible challenge, and grueling, painful, ill-thought-out achievements are no exception to that rule. When it comes time to gauge an achievement's worth, I'm always starting at a disadvantage because of two reasons. It's impossible to truly know how grueling and how different these experiences are from the main game, and my perception of that experience is going to have been influenced by the quality of the game itself. In other words, I'm only going off of what I've managed to accomplish so far, and anything beyond that is an unknown until I've made the mental commitment to go further. By the time the recognition occurs that the achievements I'm going for are worsening the overall experience, the investment into continuing is already there. It's a tale far older than games. The sunk cost fallacy. An inability that I have to simply let go and cut losses when a game is no longer providing the entertainment value that it once did, because doing so would render all the effort thus far meaningless. What's even more perplexing is that often the more irritating, grueling, and game-ruining an achievement becomes, the further its general completion rate drops, and in an ironically cruel way, the sense of accomplishment and validation rises as you have proven to others the ability to withstand and endure the harshest challenge a game can throw at you, regardless of whether or not that challenge was even well thought out or remotely enjoyable. The negative personal impact of achievements for, on the surface, no reason at all, is the main target of criticism when it comes to their inclusion. The argument is often made, why go through all that when they provide no value and are ultimately pointless? Unless they unlock something tangible in the game, they serve no purpose and should thus be ignored. The fact that the developers even bothered to implement them is a waste of time. I've always found the argument of purposelessness to be a really bad one, and that doesn't just extend to games. It's a criticism that's often lobbed at all sorts of hobbies and commitments: card collecting, journaling, sewing, organized sports. Really anything in life that doesn't contribute directly to financial success, people can label as purposeless. The reason I don't like this is that it's a point that can be drilled and drilled until you reach what is essentially nihilism. If the achievements are pointless, then what about the game itself? Why play games at all? Why unlock things within them? Why finish them? Why pay attention to their characters and stories? After all, the same argument could be made that those are pointless. You aren't accomplishing anything, you're just staring at a computer screen. When it comes to life, not just games, I've always subscribed to the idea that purpose is created and maintained. It doesn't simply exist. It's not some universal constant that should be searched for and found. It's cultivated, and you are the one cultivating it. Achievement hunting is meaningful to me because I have made the decision that it is, because I want it to be. I enjoy having that purpose behind my hobby, as others enjoy the purpose behind theirs. One day that may change. I may take up gardening or sewing, or start riding surfboards every morning. One day I might pick up a good novel and never look back. I titled this video an obsession, and in many ways it can be. I think there's room for me to learn and to let go of the idea that everything in my life needs to be tied to some form of accomplishment rather than just experiencing things for what they are. But at their best, that's exactly what good achievements can do. Give the nudge that players like me need to really dive into a game and experience it at its fullest. And so regardless of whether or not it matters, whether or not I end up with the shiny badge at the end, I'm going to keep my obsession going, because I'll take any excuse to play my favorite games. In fact, I think I might just jump into Halo right now. Oh no. Oh God.